Good afternoon. This is Wilfredo. It is May 2nd, bringing you the word of the day. Um, Today we'll be doing something a little bit different. Came up with an idea. I brought my tablet so I can read the passage now. I can read the passage with you, and I want to read with you the book of Hebrew, the chapter of Hebrews, chapter 11. Um, Thinking just a few verses, and that's it. And maybe just call it a day after that. What I wanted to see through this chapter is how how this fate. I mean, I thought before that the fate was basically um, individual fate. So that's why you would want more fate, uh, because it was something that it was unique to you, to a person. That's how I saw fate before. It wasn't until I started listening to Joseph Prince from Singapore, where my fate started shifting, and then I also saw some translations where, for example, Hallelujah Scriptures doesn't have faith; they use believe. Um, so when it comes to individual faith, so it's not like we have our faith, and it's our faith that makes it possible. It seems like fate. It's a person. It seems like a person, and that person is Jesus. It's like grace. Grace is it's a person, and that person is Jesus. So whenever you have faith and grace on the scene, it's a person. It's a person. So it's a person of Jesus, and so faith is that way. The more you focus on Jesus, the more you look at Jesus, the more faith you're gonna have. The more you listen about Him, the more faith you're gonna have, because His faith comes. This person comes by hearing the word of God. So think, see faith not as something that you possess and you want more, but think faith as in one person, and in as in one name, Jesus. And as you read the Bible and you look at Jesus, that faith, it gets activated. It's gonna interact with you, and this is probably what happens here in chapter 11, where you see faith interacting with individuals, and it's called a chapter of faith. So I'm reading from the translation, the Passion Translation, and it says, "The Power of Bold Faith." The title, verse 1. Now faith brings out our hopes into reality and becomes the foundation needed to acquire the things we long for. It is all the evidence that it requires proof that is still unseen. This testimony of faith is what previous generations were commended for. Faith empowers us to see that the universe was created and beautifully coordinated by the power of God's words. He spoke in the invisible realm, gave birth to all that is seen. Faith moved Abel to choose a more acceptable sacrifice to offer God than his brother Cain, and God declared him righteous because of his offering of faith. By his faith, Abel still speaks instructions to us today, even though he's long dead. Faith translated Enoch from his life, and he was taken up to heaven. He never had to experience death. He just disappeared from this world because God promoted him. For before he was translated to heavenly realms, his life had become a pleasure to God. Um, Verse 6. And without faith living within us, it would be impossible to please God. For we come to God in faith, knowing that He is real and He rewards faith of those who passionately seek Him. Faith opens up Noah's heart to receive revelation of and warnings from God about what was coming, even things that he had not been seen. But he stepped out in reverent obedience to God and built an ark. Work would save him and his family by his faith. The world was condemned, but Noah received God's gift righteousness that comes by believing. And then it keeps on going on about faith. But before I read verse 8, notice on verse 5 talks about Enoch. It says faith translated Enoch from this life, and he was taken up to heaven. He never had to experience death. He just disappeared from this world because God promoted him. Enoch didn't die. He didn't die. He was translated without seeing death. And before he was translated, he pleased God for. He says Enoch walked with God, and God took him. So there was a judgment coming for the world, for Noah, and then Enoch was left before that happened. It was that generation. So I think every generation has the opportunity to do something, because each generation has this impending judgment coming. So this is what a lot of us wants to escape the judgment, but we can't do it other than through faith. Through faith, through the grace of God. We can't just, it's just, without faith it's impossible to please God. So this is why Enoch was didn't die, but actually God just took him. So this faith is Christ. This faith is Christ. This is the person of Christ. So as you get closer to Christ, your faith will your faith will get stronger and stronger, and it will get more real, because this is like Jesus said, I am the life, the resurrection, and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is faith. So expect to have faith. Expect to see things happening because of your faith, and it goes deeper than that. It's actually Jesus' faith that sustains us. We would think that it would be our faith that is what we do that sustains us, but it's actually not. It's Jesus' faith. It's His faith that sustains us. So you don't have to worry about, because life can sometimes get where you are all high, you have faith, and then all of a sudden you drop, you don't have any faith. Jesus remains the same. He has faith. So trust His faith. Trust His faith. He is the right faith. He is the faith that will get things done. So trust Him. Let me read a few more verses. Verse 8. Faith motivated Abraham to obey God's call and leave the familiar to discover the territory he was destined to inherit from God. So he left without only a promise and without even knowing ahead of time where he was going. Abraham stepped out in faith. He lived by faith as an immigrant in his promised land, as thought it belonged to someone else. He journeyed through the land, living in tents with Isaac, Jacob, who were persuaded that they were also co-heirs of the same promise. His eyes were set on the city with unshakable foundations. Her architect and builder is God Himself. Sarah, faith, embraced God's miracle power to conceive. Though she was barren and was past of the age of childbearing, for the authority of her faith rested in the one who made the promise and tapped into His faithfulness. See, His faithfulness. This is Christ. This is Christ. This is the faith, His faithfulness. So this is where you gotta get prepared, because His faithfulness is huge, and He will come through and He will do great things for you, because He's good. Verse 12. In fact, so many children were subsequently father in the age men of faith. One who was God good as dead, that he now has offspring, as numerous as the sand of the seashore and the stars in the sky. These heroes all died, still clinging to their faith, not even receiving all the promises to them, But they saw beyond the horizon the fulfillment of the promise and gladly embraced it from the afar. They all lived their lives on earth, those who belong to another realm. For clearly, those who live this way are longing and appearing in a heavenly city. And it is, and if their hearts were still remembering what they left behind, they would have found an opportunity to go back. But they couldn't turn back, for their hearts were fixed and that was far greater. This is the heavenly realm. So because of God is not ashamed in the way to be called their God, for He has prepared a heavenly city for them. See, um, we're gonna stop there. It's gonna get longer, but you keep seeing references. Sarah conceiving past her age. She was really old, and she was rejuvenated by God, and also was barren, and then God made her fruitful, and she had Isaac, and that's an amazing thing that faith does. Uh, the natural world, uh, it only goes by what it sees, what it feels. It's a very it's not a supernatural world. It's a natural world, so you don't expect them to have faith, but in the supernatural world, the Spirit comes through, and through faith, it does things for you. So this is why miracles happen. This is how great things happen, uh, and it's through faith, through this medium, through this person, Christ. It's that we're able to receive, and I mean, you don't have to have a supernatural sighting of Jesus. If you get into the Word, if you get into the Bible, you will have faith come alive in your life. The Christ will be alive in your life, and you will have a supernatural experience like that woman with the issue of blood that that was uh, saying to herself. She came up with something, a plan, a mind, a strategy. See, her thinking was, this is the thinking that happens. Faith is the thinking that happens uh, when you put Jesus as an object of observation, of when your eyes are set up on an object and this object is Jesus. That's faith right there. So that produces a thinking. So she came up with this thinking, if I only touch the garment, his garments, the border of his garments, I will be healed. And she was healed. She received the miracle through her faith, but this faith is the object. So Jesus becomes your object, your observation. No matter how the world is coming around, you look at Jesus. You look at Jesus, and you see Him through His Word. If you have a vision, if you have experience, that's awesome. But His main goal is that you look at Jesus through the Scriptures. That's why when He resurrected and was walking, the couple was walking on the way. He appeared to them, but he hid his appearance through and they couldn't see him. They couldn't recognize him. So he hid his appearance, but he opened the scriptures to him, and he revealed himself through the scriptures. And their heart was on fire because of what they were hearing about Jesus through the scriptures. Even though he was there with them, he didn't want them to see him. So when they broke the bread, and then they recognized him. But the main goal was for Jesus was for them to see it through the scriptures. So if you have a vision, and that's awesome. But main purpose, it's see him through the scriptures, see Jesus through the scriptures. So he's available there. Let him be your object, and when he becomes your object of observation, then he will be that faith. You don't have to. It's not a personal thing, that it comes from you. So whether you feel or don't feel faith, he is the faith. He is faithfulness. He's faithful. Depend on his faithfulness for your life. Let me. This is getting exciting. So let me just read a few more verses. Verse 17. Faith operated powerfully in Abraham, for when he was put to the test, he offered Isaac. Even though he received God's promise of descendants, he was willing to offer up his only son. For God had promised through your son Isaac, Your lineage will carry your name. Abraham's faith made it logical for him that God could raise Isaac from the dead, and symbolically, that's exactly what happened. The power of faith prompted Isaac to impart a blessing on his son Jacob Esau concerning the prophetic destinies. Jacob worshipped in faith reality at the end of his life, and learning upon his staff imparted a prophetic blessing upon each of Joseph's son. Faith inspired Joseph and opened his eyes to see in the future. For he was dying, he prophesied about the exodus of Israel out of Egypt, and gave instructions that his bones were to be taken from Egypt with him. Verse 22. Faith prompted the parents of Moses, the bird, to hide him for 3 months, because they realized their child was exceptional, and they refused to be afraid of the king's edict. Faith enabled Moses to choose God's will, for although he was raised as the son of Pharaoh's daughter, he refused to make that his identity, choosing instead to suffer mistreatment with the people of God. Moses preferred faith's certainty above the momentary enjoyments of sin. Pleasures, he found his true wealth in suffering about abuse of being anointed more than anything in the world could offer him. For his eyes looked with wonder not on the immediate but on the ultimate. Faith great reward. Holding faith's promise, Moses abandoned Egypt. He had no fear of Pharaoh and rage, because he persisted in faith as if he had seen God who is unseen. Faith stirred up Moses to perform the rite of Passover and sprinkled lamb's blood to prevent the destroyer from harming the firstborn. Faith opened up the way to the Hebrews to cross the Red Sea as if dried on land, but when the Egyptians tried to cross, they were swallowed up and drawn. Verse 29, it's interesting. This is where I was reading yesterday in the afternoon, and I'm thinking, this wasn't their faith. It was, it looks like these people. This is the Hebrews to cross the Red Sea under the faith opened up the way for the Hebrews to cross the Red Sea. But if you read that event, they were complaining. They were complaining on that they were gonna die, that they were trapped, and it says faith made it possible for them to cross the Red Sea. So this is where faith. Some people remember the passage where Peter was in jail, and the church was praying for Peter, and when God answered their prayer, they couldn't even believe it. So they were praying for something they couldn't believe was happening. It's not their faith. It's faith by itself. So it's faith making things possible. That's why you gotta make the object of your faith, and then you can see it there when it says Moses saw as God the invisible. They were looking at something, and that's what made their faith. That's what made their faith. They were looking at something, and that's Christ. That's Christ. That's the message of Christ. They looking at Christ, and that faith made it possible for them to cross the Red Sea. And it wasn't so much their own personal faith. It was the faith that they were contemplating, the faith that was associated with, and then that's what's getting them through. So there's action, and the action is it's amongst them. It's near them. And that's what Paul says. The message is near in your heart and your mouth. So this is the faith. So I'm getting excited. Just going to read a few verses. Faith pulled down Jericho walls after the people marched around them for 7 days. Faith provided a way to escape for Rahab the prostitute, providing a destruction of the unbelievers, because they received the Hebrew spies in peace. And what more could I say to convince you? Well, there's not enough time to tell you the fate of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets. Through faith's power, they conquered kingdoms, established true justice. Their faith fastens onto their promise and pull them into reality. It is faith that shuts them out of the lions, put out the power of raging fire, and caused many to escape certain deaths by the sword. Although weak, their faith imparted power to make them strong. Faith sparked courage. Faith then would they become mighty warriors in battle, pulling armies from another realm into the battle array. Faith filled women saw their dead children rise in direction power. Yet it was faith that enabled others to endure great atrocities. They were stretched out in the wheel and tortured and didn't deny their faith in order to be free because they longed for a more honorable and glorious resurrection. Others were mocked and experienced the most severe beatings and whips. They were in chains and prison. Some of their faith champions were brutally killed by stoning, being sawn in two or slaughtered by the sword. This life in faith as they went about wearing goatskins, sheepskins for clothing. They lost everything they possessed. They endured the great affliction, and they were cruel, mistreated. They wandered the earth, living in the desert, wilderness, in the caves on barren mountains, in the holes of the earth. Truly, the world was not even worthy of them, not realizing who they were. These were the true heroes commended for their faith. But remember, their faith is Christ. Yet they live in hope without receiving fullness of what promised them. But now God has invited us to live something better than what they had. Faithfulness. This is so that they could be brought from to finish perfection alongside of us. So that's it. 39 verses of it's talking about faith. How faith does this. How faith does that. Martyrs of Christ, people who were killed, suffer. They were able to do it because of their faith. People like Daniel shutting up the lion's mouth was their faith. It was the object they were contemplating that made things happen for them. Same thing with David conquering cities, conquering countries. It was their faith, contemplating what they believe, that made that possible. So, as you read this chapter, you will see that there's some